In many ways, our central ideas is to get that kind of consensus or towards a consensus statement around what we want researched, how we want to research that, and how we want to establish that within the sector. So we really want to hear from you right now and try and scribe as much of that up onto the space as possible. There's conversations currently between 3 universities and the Mental Health Commission to actually support those partnerships that would enable that to occur. So I don't see that it actually exists right now. That particular framework pathway, but there are the kind of small projects that are happening all around the place that are beginning to join up. And some of the examples are in acute settings where there's consumer researchers working with to look at the experience of care around strengths-based models. There's people here who are looking at ECT and supporting consumer research around ECT and the experience of ECT, and all of those opportunities are starting to unfold. So yes, I don't think the implementation framework is currently there, but it's on track.
I'll stand up. I've got a question about co-production. And any of these methods we use in research or service development or service design or service delivery, because when I think about it, we're just kind of quite rare, us peers who go to these sorts of things. Most people, their whole interaction with services is at the one-to-one. They go into a service and they meet a bunch of people who are paid to be there. And how do we get these kind of ideas like co-production into those one-to-one relationships or these other ideas? Because I think we'll blow it out of the water if you talked about a psychiatrist. How does a psychiatrist have a co-created relationship with the person who comes along and uses the service? Because that's where the power is really, really making, it's really restricting our lives. And so how can we use these methodologies in that one-to-one interaction?
So just in response to that, a couple of things, I suppose. I think of supported decision making is happening in that space. So for me, supported decision making, and I've seen in the literature actually where co-production has been used to describe that relationship, and I think that's wrong. For me, supported decision making is something that sits in that space, not shared decision making, but where providers are actively searching for that agency and for it to be resumed and all that kind of stuff. And co-production sort of feels like it's reserved for more systemic kind of stuff. And just to say that I think consumers are really in a great position to be the ones to offer training to services in readiness for co-production. That's one of the things that we do at the centre. It's delivered in a co-produced way. The development of it was done co-productively and so on. So I think there's some fruitful things that can be done around preparing organisations for dropping back, knowing how to let go, knowing how to pay attention to power imbalances. All of that sort of stuff, so that and being able to sort of be a buffer against if there's sort of hierarchical pressures coming down, how to actually be a buffer against that so that the pace is proper.
I'd like to comment on that just briefly from my research, and I've called it accidental research, and it was within the context of the larger organisation not actually knowing what I was doing, and kind of going, it's only 10 grand, we'll let him get on with it, and it'll probably fall out that it'll be just one of those consumer things that falls over. And I think we need to evoke that situation a little bit as well and be robust and actually in some ways stand up and say, actually, this is what I want research because this is important to me. And become collegial with each other and get kind of the weight of numbers behind us. Because I would never do it that way again. It was too taxing to go down that road that way. But that doesn't mean that we can't come up with our own research questions, get collegial with each other, start to partner with kind of with organisations and what makes a good entry point, and actually start to shape those entry points for ourselves. I don't think we should be waiting for that opportunity. We need to be stepping into those, and I know that's a bit challenging and it can be frightening and all those things, but we need to be robust as well. What you've actually done there is you've come full circle. You've come full circle around to some of the things that have been said in the groups. That is, and from the front of the room too, around we know what we know, and people are willing to listen to us and are willing to be with us in a research situation, and to actually really take ownership of that, and yeah, get the developmental kind of skills stuff around that, but have the lived experience be the credential for how we actually bring that forward. And because it actually talks to what we do on a day-to-day basis. And the other kind of skill set can be enabled along the way, but it's to actually take ownership of that skill set and that experiential skill set in the first part. This is part of research as well, is actually standing in the front of the room and presenting your ideas. So it's an invitation to do that. So who's first?
So a lot of researchers like to come and speak to our clients and ask them a whole lot of questions and do research around them. And, you know, they'll get some sort of reward, $40 or a $10 Coles voucher. The sort of things they're being interviewed for were there's something called the Nomad study, which I'm not really sure what that is actually, a mental health study. At the moment there's someone who comes along and interviews our clients post-shot in Stage 3 where they have tea and coffee, and they're doing a smoking study. And so what struck me was that whilst our clients are often interviewed and researched, they don't get to see the outcomes of that research. They're just like lab rabbits or something. They're a specimen to be researched, to be probed and researched. So what I'm going to be taking back to my work is that, please, when we hear that this research that's been going on by these outside people has finished, can we please get those results and have them in a place where our clients, whether they've participated or not, but especially those who have participated, can get their hands on and make those, you know, these strange little meetings they have with these strangers to mean something, that they've contributed in some way, and it's not just, you know, somebody digging into their heads. So I really want to try and bring that change about when I get back to work and say, can we please get that research and point our clients in that direction, say, hey, this is what it was about. This is what you were interviewed about. That's what I took from today. Thank you.
That's actually about bringing forward a code of ethics that's actually consumer-centred, and actually looking at research methodologies that have, you know, there's a long lineage of taking back practices to participants that's baseline for any good participatory research process. So it's not out of the box. It's kind of like there's a massive lineage on that very thing that we need to be aligning with from a consumer-led code of ethics, and starting to do that work.
I guess part of my experience of the day, I'm in some ways a traditional quant researcher, so I always feel a bit embattled when I come here with the social researchers. I suppose it's reverse stigma or discrimination, if you want. So the social researchers often get a lot of that from the quant guys. Not that we'd sneer at people, but I guess listening to, I was in Bradley's session in the breakout. It was about the personalisation of the people at the centre of the research, which are the consumers, and also the different levels of evidence that are around and the different methods you can use. And I think for me, you know, I'm sort of a methodology person, is that it's whatever you're trying to achieve, to pick the best method and the best people to do that with. So, for example, I've got a real thing with stigma. I'm very interested in stigma, and I came to stigma research through a randomised controlled trial that had personal stories right at the centre of it. So, you know, and that was in the end very powerful evidence that it's not the numbers that change people's attitudes and minds. It is the personal story. And that the effect of that particular research lasted over 12 months, that people's attitudes were still different after 12 months, just from one session of a personal story, compared to that lecturer's lectures on stigma, which made no difference whatsoever. In my words to that lecturer at the time, his lectures were shit. But the thing is, with all the goodwill in the world, he couldn't change people's minds without that personal story.
How important the lived experience is and the relating of those stories, but it has to be purposeful, and we all have to learn how to use purposeful storytelling, and as Bradley and I were speaking about before, not to be consumer or carer porn to these people. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to speak to that whole idea of consumer porn for a sec, and because we have been utilised that way within research and within training situations, and it's debilitating, and it's really impactful on people. And if what we're doing here today and what we've come to sit with today and around producing research artefacts, even if it's newsletters, if it's a newsletter that actually is compiled around the telling of consumers, but it has purpose attached to it, it has an artefact attached to it, and has that kind of purpose beyond the initial telling, where it travels and actually gets out into the community and gets into the research community in particular, it stops being consumer porn because it's us theorising against our own experience. And that's the real beauty of us coming here together today and talking about research, is that we get to do that thing, theorise against our own experience. It's not only storytelling, it's theorising, it's kind of like providing evidence, it's the changing of hearts and minds. One of the issues that we face is there is a conception out there that we as consumer researchers will only be working with consumers, that we're only gathering lived experience. But there's much research. Cath's work out of the University of Melbourne with around seclusion and restraint reduction was drawing on the stories of consumers, mental health professionals, the data available in the cross section across all of the states and national kind of processes and practices and how that's all done. It was about including all of those other voices. We shouldn't limit ourselves to that idea that it's just about us collecting consumer stories, because that again becomes tantamount to consumer porn.
I'm really excited from today and energised, and yeah, I'm just inspired by the work everyone's been doing and the knowledge in the room. I'm working on the ECT Let's Talk About It project that Bradley mentioned earlier, which is a consumer-driven project. That's how I was naming it, but after being in one of the sessions today, I think it may be a bit of co-production, because we have professionals, psychiatrists, academics on the steering committee, and we're having a really good evolving relationship. And I guess this has sort of lessened my fear as well, because I'm coming from the place that actually I don't know what I'm doing, and this is new, and this is evolving in time as we learn lessons and as we get more involved in it. But I was thinking, actually I've got a real lot to bring to the project, because I guess something that I can teach the people on the steering committee, the professionals, the academics and stuff, is that my incredible openness to learning from them, and hopefully they'll have that in return to the consumer researchers.
I'm really passionate about supporting consumer-led research. And I think one of the things that we as kind of, your garden variety academics can bring is helping people negotiate the systems. And figuring out, how do we go through the processes of, getting ethics approval? How do we make sure that our stuff can be published in the mainstream research literature? Because I think that, I'd love to see a lot of kind of research kind of come out and share with one another. But if we want to change the system so that it respects consumer-led research, I think we do need to be in those spaces where typical researchers read. And the other thing I think is we also need to find a language where, when somebody's going to look for consumer-led research, that we can actually find it. And so one of the things that I think this network can do is say every piece of research that comes out needs to be called, consumer-led research, or there was a phrase you were talking about it. Mad
studies.
Mad studies. And it's some kind of keyword where we can collect up all of this stuff in a way that we can learn from that. Because trying to get the methodologies used in this area are different to the methodologies that I'm used to. And so getting in there and sharing that stuff, I think, is really important. And the keyword search is critical to that, I think.
I actually wanted to comment from the Consumer-Led Research Network, which I think I've been part of now for about 18 months, that today is the first time we've brought together a rather large quantity of people together to talk about consumer research. Up to now, there's been about 20 of us, give and take, sitting in a room. And this is a real opportunity for us to network. We have set up a Facebook page. We'd like it much more enthusiastically than Twitter today. If people were to join, it is actually a place where some of these ideas that we've been talking about, language, pro bono, sharing information, sharing research, can actually occur and network across mental health and drug and alcohol. But it will only work if people get involved. And it means that we can grow beyond our little nuclear team, which gets together and chats, 4 times a year, and then on the phone and email and that kind of stuff, and actually can make this something bigger and a movement, which would be fantastic. In terms of language, this is a personal comment. There is language, getting this space where we agree on language. I would also like to say we need to respect language across sectors, because they can have very different meanings. And the recovery movement is one that we've come across before. The recovery movement in mental health means something very, very different to the recovery movement in drug and alcohol. And forcing definitions by either the sheer number of people who are already in the sector based on the fact they're more in mental health or more in drug and alcohol. I'm not sure how you do that without actually starting to distort what you mean. So maybe there needs to be some kind of translational document or a glossary of key terms that you can look up when you're researching rather than actually seeking consensus on language.
Just one thing that came out of today's talks, which I found really interesting, I think it came from Cath's talk, and she was talking about needing to engage in open and honest conversation about potential power imbalances when you are involving consumers in research. So I'm a first year PhD student. I'm looking to develop a shared decision-making intervention and have a working expert party of consumers, carers and clinicians. And I've been to a few expert forums which have involved clinicians, researchers and consumers, and very quickly the consumers get sidelined and they're no longer engaged in the conversation, and very quickly the whole conversation gets dominated by psychiatrists, psychologists and other allied mental health. So I think that one thing that I've taken from this and that I hope to apply when I do start engaging in this process of a working party is to actually have that open, upfront conversation from the outset and say, just discuss like possible dynamics that and how that could all come to play. So thank you.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just about stuck for words now. That's an amazing outcome. It's an amazing outcome for us and from the Consumer-Led Research Network and its current membership, and hopefully including as many of you as choose to kind of be a part of that from here on in, or not, and take your own kind of processes towards stepping into that space. There's been some amazing conversations today. I'm a bit short of words, I'm sorry. I'm actually a little bit overwhelmed by the response of having just the massive amount of work that's gone into this, but the shout out that we gave, and that you guys have heard that shout out and have come here and spent the day with us in this way, and that you have become us in this, and that is just really moving for me. And it's been a long journey from this idea starting up about 4 years ago and seeing it fall over on a number of occasions and actually have it come to fruition today in this particular way is just really moving for me. So I'd like to just maybe comment on where we've been. Many of us who stand in the front of the room are privileged by language, are privileged by education, and a lot of this work is actually about the people who stand, all of the people who stand visibly or invisibly behind us. So I really appreciated you doing that very thing. Also this afternoon, the open mic session, which I thought was invaluable for actually getting the experience of people and what we take away in regard to how can we move forward. The stuff around quantitative, qualitative research space was a lovely place to dance in and to honour all of those things. To have such generosity, people generously bringing forward the mentoring piece, the kind of the pro bono piece and a whole bunch of other things. So I'm not going to bang on very much longer, just to say that I feel like today this has been like the birth of a child that's been kind of gestating and kind of getting around there, and I've had some moments of gasping in the birth of this child, and I just truly appreciate you guys stepping up and stepping into this space, because it's not always easy, and we do need to be robust, and we do need those bridges and those pathways to actually support greater confidence and robustness, because we can produce rigorous research. We already have. It's just located disparately, and what our opportunity is here to begin that generalisation process. Because what we've tried to do is get evidence from all of those different areas so that we can bring it all together and create the beginnings of what might be a consensus document that talks about what we've done today, and then be able to consult with you again about honing that down to particular research questions that are valuable to consumers and methodologies that actually fit the bill.
And can everyone join together? Thank Bradley. Without him, we actually wouldn't be in the room.
Thank you. Good on that. Sweet.